At 25, Laura carried the responsibility of her mother and brother on her shoulders, taking one step every day to make a living. One day, an unexpected accident turned her life upside down. She dedicates every last bit of her strength to saving a life. But this is neither an end nor just a beginning. Will this rescue open the doors to a path that will challenge her even further, or will it transform into a battle to save her own life? One decision could change everything. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and turn on notifications to support us. Please check out our other stories as well. Thank you. Laura was a 25-year-old young woman whose life had been turned upside down in the past few years, ever since her mother fell ill and could no longer work. All the responsibility had fallen on her shoulders from that day on. She hadn't thought about herself for even a single moment. She had sacrificed everything for her family. The financial struggles were getting heavier by the day, and hospital bills and medication costs loomed over her like an insurmountable mountain. But Laura was not someone who gave up easily. Her younger brother David, studying at a prestigious university, was a source of pride for her, and she did everything she could to support him. Even when she only had a few coins left in her pocket, she made sure his education was never disrupted. To make meet, Laura took every extra shift she could at the cafe, where she worked, constantly searching for new job opportunities in her free time to earn more. She often spent up to 16 hours a day on her feet, and even when her legs ached from exhaustion, she never complained. There were times when she worked for days without rest, but the hope she carried inside kept her going. She had only one dream: to free her family from these struggles. She wanted to give them a comfortable life, ensure her mother received the best treatment possible, and see David graduate successfully. She fought for this dream every single day, never shying away from any sacrifice. But despite all the burdens and hardships, Laura's best quality was that she never lost her smile. Everyone at the CF admired her, no matter how exhausted she was or how unfair life had been to her. She always served customers with a warm smile. There was always a spark in her eyes, no matter what storms raged inside her. She always tried to stay positive. However, she had no idea what other tests life had in store for her. Laura woke up early that morning, just like she always did. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep, but she was used to it by now. The first thing she did was head to the kitchen to prepare a nutritious soup for her mother. She wanted to leave something warm for her to ease the exhaustion that her illness brought. She placed a small note next to the soup. "Today will be a good day, Mom. I love you so much. Please rest." Okay, her chest tightened as she left the note. Seeing her mother so helpless was the hardest thing for her, but she tried not to show it. Taking a deep breath, she threw on her coat and stepped outside. That day, she was working both the opening and closing shifts at the cafe. It was going to be exhausting, but for her, the busier the better. More hours meant more money. As she made her way to work in the early morning darkness, the world around her was still quiet. Snow had fallen heavily throughout the night, covering the city in a thick white blanket, creating a breathtaking view. The crunch of snow beneath her boots gave her an odd sense of peace. No matter what, she was doing everything she could to hold on to life. Just as she approached the street where the cafe was, a vehicle caught her attention. One she wasn't familiar with. It was a large camper van loaded with various materials. Strapped to the back, wooden planks, metal sheets, and plywood were stacked haphazardly, but it was hard to tell exactly what they were. As the camper van slowly made its way forward, she noticed a black car following closely. Behind it was moving just as cautiously. Something fell off, and then everything happened in an instant. The pile of wood, metal, and plywood on the camper van suddenly came loose and collapsed onto the black car. Behind it, a deafening crash echoed through the street. The camper van driver, unaware of what had just happened, kept driving. Laura's breath caught her throat. "Somebody help," she shouted, breaking into a run, but the street was nearly empty at this hour. She looked at the driver of the camper van. He was wearing headphones. He couldn't hear anything happening outside. The black car, meanwhile, had been completely buried under the wreckage. It had practically disappeared. Laura fumbled for her phone, her hands shaking. She dialed 911 and gave them the address with a trembling voice. But she couldn't just stand there and wait. She needed to know if anyone inside was still alive. She ran to the wreckage with all her strength. She tried to lift some of the metal sheets and plywood, but it was too heavy. She could barely move them. Desperate, she shouted, "Is anyone in there? Say something." But the only response was silence. A chill ran down her spine. What if they were already dead? The thought sent her into full-blown panic. She pushed herself harder, summoning every ounce of strength. She had to shift a large metal sheet aside. That's when she finally saw the driver. He was slumped over the steering wheel, completely still. Blood trickled from his head. No, no, please, Laura murmured, her heart pounding wildly. She couldn't tell if he was unconscious or worse. She had to move faster. Her arms were already weakening, but she couldn't stop now. She lifted a few more pieces of plywood to reach the front door. Her muscles ached, her fingers throbbed in pain. But she finally got to the handle. She managed to yank the door open and reach for the man's wrist. His pulse was weak, but he was still alive. But would he make it until the ambulance arrived? Laura noticed that shattered glass was scattered everywhere, and a thin cloud of dust hung in the air. The sharp smell of burnt metal stung her nose. Staying inside the vehicle was dangerous. She had to get the man out. Taking a deep breath, she dropped to her knees. She carefully held the man's neck steady, knowing she had to prevent any potential spinal injuries. Then, gripping his shoulders, she slowly began pulling him out of the car. His body was limp, but she could still feel the warmth of his skin. Laura's breathing grew faster. She was using every ounce of strength she had, but he was heavy. Her muscles burned beneath her thick coat. Her palms were slick with sweat, but she refused to stop. Finally, she managed to pull him completely out of the car and lowered him gently onto the snow. For a moment, time seemed to freeze. The white snow was now stained with blood. A flash of memory struck Laura's mind, her first aid training from when she applied for her driver's license. She needed to check his pulse. She quickly placed her fingers on his neck. It was very, very weak. She checked his breathing. His chest was rising and falling, but barely. His heart could stop at any moment. No, don't die on me, she thought desperately, placing her hands firmly on top of each other. She started performing chest compressions. 1, 2, 3, 4, she counted out loud. As she pressed down with each push, pain shot through her hands, her arms trembled. But she didn't care. The only thing that mattered was keeping him alive. Minutes passed. Cold sweat trickled down Laura's forehead, but she never stopped. Press, count, check for breathing. The bleeding on his head seemed to have slowed, but he was still unconscious. Just as she was about to lose hope, the distant wail of sirens pierced the silence. A surge of relief flooded Laura's chest. Hold on just a little longer, she whispered to herself, pushing harder. Red and blue lights slashed through the white landscape, approaching rapidly. The ambulance screeched to a stop right next to them. The doors flew open, and paramedics jumped out, moving with urgency. What happened? One of them asked as they rushed toward Laura. A camper van's load fell on his car. His pulse was weak, so I performed CPR. The paramedics immediately took over with swift precision. They attached electrodes to his chest, checked his blood pressure, and fitted him with an oxygen mask. The professionals were now in control, but Laura was still gasping for breath. They quickly lifted him onto a stretcher, preparing to transport him into the ambulance. As Laura watched their focused, determined faces, she desperately needed to know if he would make it the last second. She turned to one of the paramedics and with a final effort called out, "Please, can you update me on his condition later?" One of them, holding in 4 bag, turned to her. "If you leave a contact number, we can reach out. Do you have a business card?" Laura's mind stalled for a second. She didn't have a card. She blurted out the first thing that came to mind. "Please call Yin Coffee. I work there. My name is Laura." The paramedic gave her a quick nod. "Got it," he said before shutting the ambulance doors. The engine roared to life. The tires spun over the snow, and within moments the ambulance had disappeared. Laura was left standing in the cold, empty street. Her arms were still shaking. Her knees wobbled, nearly giving out beneath her. Her breasts were ragged, but at least she had done what she could. She turned her gaze toward the wreckage. The black car, crushed and abandoned. Everything had happened in just a few minutes, but it felt like hours. Finally, she took a deep breath, and the harsh reality hit her like a punch to the gut. She was late for work. Despite everything that had just happened, she still had to go to her shift. Without thinking, she started walking. Her legs were heavier, mind foggy, but this wasn't the first time she had felt like this. She was used to exhaustion, to falling, to getting back up. She picked up her pace. A new day was beginning, and her life would never be the same again. Laura arrived at the cafe, completely out of breath. As she processed everything that had happened, the adrenaline rush began to wear off, replaced by a deep, crushing exhaustion. The camper van, the falling cargo, the man trapped under the wreckage. It all replayed in her mind like a never-ending film. But she had to be here now. She was only a few minutes late. She quickly got to work. She took orders, served coffee, and tried to smile at customers. She always did, but her body was protesting. Her muscles ached As if working tirelessly all morning wasn't enough, she had also taken on a double shift today. The events of the morning had drained every last bit of her strength. By mid-morning, she allowed herself a short coffee break to clear her head. Her hands trembled as she reached for her cup. The warm aroma of the coffee drifted up to her nose, but even that wasn't enough to ground her. Her chest still felt tight, her arms were numb. But she had to keep going. Giving up wasn't enough option. She whispered to herself, "Come on, Laura, just get through today." Then she forced herself to stand up and return to work. By midday, the pace hadn't slowed down. The cafe was packed. Orders kept coming in nonstop. Yet despite everything, she continued to serve customers with a smile. And then the phone rang. One of the cashiers glanced up. "Laura, it's for you." Laura's chest tightened for a moment. She couldn't breathe. Who would be calling at this hour? Was it bad news? Something about her mother? David, heart pounding. She rushed to pick up the phone. "Hello." She answered, her voice shaky. "Hello. This is emergency services calling for a second." The world stopped. Her heart pounded violently in her chest. What if it was about the man she had saved this morning? "We just wanted to inform you that the person you performed first aid on is no longer in critical condition. Thank you for your quick response. You did the right thing." Laura let out a deep breath. It was as if a massive weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She hadn't even realized how tense she had been until that very moment. The exhaustion she had felt earlier seemed to momentarily fade. "Oh, I'm so relieved. Thank you for letting me know," she said, her voice almost emotional. As she hung up, she felt a small but powerful sense of victory. She had saved a life. Just then her boss appeared behind her. He had noticed a change in her expression. "Everything okay? Was it something about your mom?" he asked, frowning slightly. Laura quickly pulled herself together. "No, everything's fine," she said immediately. He needed to know she was focused on her job. But her boss gave her a suspicious look. Then, crossing his arms, he spoke in a serious tone. "Look, Laura, things are busy, and you seem exhausted. If working this much is getting too hard for you, we can rotate shifts with the others until we find someone new." Laura froze. She needed the extra shifts more than anyone. She couldn't afford to lose them. She immediately shook her head. "No, I'm fine. I'll close the cafe tonight. Don't worry," she said, her voice firm though panic bubbled inside her. Her boss hesitated for a moment before nodding. "All right. But if you can't keep up, you need to say something. We can't have things falling apart." Laura nodded quickly. "They won't," she assured him. But as soon as he walked away, she was left alone with her own doubts. How much longer could she keep this up? Yes, she was beyond exhausted today. Every muscle in her body was screaming at her to stop, but she couldn't. For her mother, for David, and maybe now, just maybe even for herself, she was fighting a battle that seemed small to others but meant everything to her. And this battle was far from over. Laura had spent the entire day on her feet, working nonstop. As the hours dragged on, her body grew heavier, her legs trembled, and her muscles ached. She pushed herself to serve the last few customers, but her body was reaching its limit. "I just need a moment to rested she thought, taking advantage of a brief lull in the cafe. She sank into the chair by the register. She only meant to close her eyes for a few seconds, but exhaustion took control of her mind, and she fell asleep right there in her seat. It felt like just a few seconds, but in reality minutes had passed, until a sharp voice jolted her awake. "Laura." She jerked upright, her eyes snapped open, and she shot to her feet. Her heart pounded against her ribs. Her boss stood in front of her, his face set in a deep frown, his eyes narrowed in frustration. "Two tables are waiting for their checks." Laura's breath came in ragged gasps. She felt frozen in place. "I'm so sorry. I'll take care of it right now," she stammered, scrambling to get the bills and rushing to the tables, her hands shaking as she handed them out. The customers didn't seem to notice anything was wrong, but Laura was falling apart inside. How could she have let this happen? She had fallen asleep at work. That was unacceptable. Her heart pounded as she felt her boss's piercing gaze on her. When she returned to the register, he was still, their arms crossed, his expression stern. It was clear that after this morning's warning, this was the last straw. "Look, Laura," he said, "I already warned you this morning. This isn't working. You're letting your exhaustion affect your job." Laura panicked and blurted out her defense. "Please, you have to understand, I was just so tired because of what happened this morning." Her voice was filled with desperation. In a rush, she explained everything: the camper van, the falling debris, the injured man, the ambulance. Her boss was silent for a moment. Then he let out a deep breath. "Laura, I'm not going to fire you, but I also can't have you overworking yourself to the point that you can't do your job properly." His tone was calmer now, but still firm. Laura exhaled slowly. At least she wasn't losing her job. But then he continued, "For now on, everyone will only be allowed to take one extra shift per week." That's fine. Laura's stomach twisted, losing her overtime shifts. That was a disaster with only her base salary. She could barely cover the household expenses and her mother's medication, but she wouldn't be able to send money to David. Her brother was studying at a prestigious university. He deserved to continue his education without worrying about finances. He had worked so hard to get there. But now what was she going to do? Laura took a deep breath. She needed to find another solution. As her boss walked away, her mind raced. Second job. She needed to find a part-time job somewhere else. Closing her eyes, she made herself a promise. "I won't give up no matter what it takes. I won't let David's education be interrupted." Straightening her posture, she grabbed her coat and stepped outside. The icy air hit her face, but it did nothing to ease the stress inside her. She needed to find another job fast. The next morning, when Laura arrived at the cafe, she had everything planned out for the day. She was so exhausted, but she still gathered every bit of energy. She had left today. She couldn't afford to work any overtime. After a shift, she would attend interviews for a few jobs she had found online. At least there was a glimmer of hope for her brother, for her mother, for herself. There was a determination inside her. But first she had to make today perfect. The cafe, which had started to get busy in the early hours, had reached its peak by noon. Laura was quickly preparing orders, trying to smile at customers. But her mind wasn't fully there still. She had to focus. And then the door opened, and a man walked in. Everything slowed down in an instant as the man entered. Everyone in the cafe turned to look at him. Laura involuntarily focused on him. His energy and demeanor were unmistakable. The man walked toward the counter. The cashier immediately called out to Laura, "Laura, you have a guest." Laura took a deep breath and glanced around the room. She could immediately tell the man's posture and confidence. Who could it be, she thought? But the answer came to her quickly. The man, with seriousness, asked the cashier, "Could I speak with Laura?" The cashier, visibly shocked, said, "Mr. Noah, I'm such a huge fan of yours. I never miss your films." Laura was momentarily stunned. Noah? Who was this man? Then when she looked at the man's face, Laura was stunned to realize this was the man she had helped yesterday. His face had looked familiar, but the man, with deep gratitude in his eyes, turned to Laura and said, "I came to thank you. I hope I'm not disturbing you." He paused and added, "Do you have a few minutes for a moment?" Laura couldn't say a word. She replayed yesterday's events in her mind. The man she helped, a stranger who had entered her life, but now he was no longer a stranger. Just then her boss approached and, shaking his head, said, "No, it's fine, but don't take too long." Noah nodded. "I'm sorry, I'll come by after your shift. I didn't mean to impose." He asked shyly, "What time do you finish?" Laura, recovering slightly, answered, "I'll be done by 5. Noah nodded politely and began to turn to leave, but the cashier, eyes wide, turned to Laura and exclaimed, "Oh my God, you saved Noah Miller. He's such a famous director." At first, Laura was shocked. A director? She didn't have much time to care about cinema or movies, yet everyone in the cafe was staring, clearly recognizing him. Noah Miller. She repeated things in her mind, started to click into place, but there was still no concrete confirmation. For a moment, she felt as though everything had changed. This was the most unexpected moment of her life yesterday, while fighting to keep him alive. Today, a person from another world, someone so different from her own reality, had found her. When Laura left the cafe, she encountered something unusual outside. Noah Miller was taking pictures with a few fans in front of his cafe. She couldn't believe he was such a well-known person. A group of people surrounded him, laughing and happily taking photos. Laura paused in her steps, and at that moment, Noah thanked his fans, turned his eyes to her, and quickly walked away from the crowd toward Laura. Laura lowered her head, feeling embarrassed. Suddenly, everything felt awkward. She wasn't sure how to act in the face of Noah's graceful, kind demeanor and elegance. She noticed he was in his 40s, very well dressed, and had a charismatic presence. Noah smiled gently and said, "How about we have a coffee?" Without thinking, Laura nodded, and they went to a nearby cafe. Once inside, Noah quickly ordered coffee, then turned to Laura and said, "I owe you my life." His sincerity made Laura feel a warmth inside. Noah continued, "We were on our way to a film shoot when our caravan broke down. We had loaded the set equipment in the caravan, but unfortunately it tipped over, and the equipment was completely destroyed." As Laura recalled the destruction she had seen inside the caravan, she was shocked. Yes, the wreckage had indeed belonged to a film set. "It's not that important. Anyone would have done the same," she answered shyly. But Noah, while listening to her, had a deep sense of gratitude in his eyes. After taking a sip of his coffee, He asked, "Tell me something about your life, Laura. What are you up to?" Laura hesitated for a moment. "But want to talk about David. I have a brother," she said, a smile appearing on her face. "His name is David. He got accepted into a prestigious school this year. I'm so proud of him. He's hardworking and determined. His achieving the success you see means so much to me." As Laura spoke about the difficult journey David had been through, her voice rose slightly with pride. David's success is a huge step for his life. That school is really prestigious, and there were many tough obstacles. But he made it. Noah listened intently and noticed something in Laura's eyes. His gaze turned mysterious as he looked at Laura and said, "David, I'd love to learn more about him." He paused for a moment, then added, "But I want to ask you something, Laura. Have you ever thought about acting? You have such a natural presence. You convey your excitement so beautifully. It's as if you're on a big theater stage." Laura, stunned by Noah's words, slowly blushed. "No, I've never thought about it," she said. Noah smiled and thought for a moment. "I know maybe it sounds a bit strange, but if you have time outside of work, would you be interested in working as an extra? Just for a while, of course, you get paid. You might even learn something on set. Who knows, maybe even start a career. I see great potential in you." Laura's heart began to race. When she heard the offer, it seemed like such an exciting opportunity. She needed extra work, and this job felt like a door opening to a completely different world. Noah smiled again and said, "You shouldn't miss this. I really think you should give it a try." Laura paused for a moment, but then said, "Let's try it then," with determination and excitement in her eyes. Noah, with a sparkle in his eyes, replied, "Great, we'll make it work together." And at that moment, Laura's life began to change. When Laura first stepped onto the set, she couldn't believe her eyes. This was a completely different world. While she was working at the cafe, she hadn't realized how different her life was from this. But now, with everything she was seeing, she understood how big the difference truly was. Air, makeup, lights, costumes. Everything was incredible. After getting her hair and makeup done, Laura paused for a moment, looking at her reflection in the mirror. "Is this really me?" She thought. Her eyes were sparkling, and her reflection was truly beautiful. But this wasn't just about her appearance. At that moment, Laura felt truly different and strong. For a while, she continued working as an extra after her shifts at the cafe. People on set were captivated by Laura's natural beauty and demeanor. Everyone was paying attention to her, giving her compliments. But Laura felt that this was just the beginning. One day, a producer visited the set. During the visit, the producer noticed Laura. All eyes were on her because there was a light in her eyes. Noah, too, had noticed her. The producer had a short conversation with Noah. "There's something about this girl," he said. "We should work with her." In that moment, Laura felt like she was at a turning point in her life. The producer suggested she take voice and acting lessons, but Laura knew she didn't have time for that. She was still working at the cafe, struggling to make ends meet. "I don't have time for this. My life is too complicated," she said. The producer replied, "It'll be worth it. We'll support you through the process. We'll help you." Laura looked at him in shock. She was transitioning to a completely different level. "But this was real, really?" she asked. "Can I really do this?" Noah, standing beside her, said, "Yes, Laura. I'll support you all the way. Let's make this happen together." As Laura completed her training with Noah's support, she gained confidence. At first, acting felt difficult, but she progressed quickly. Her self-assurance grew with each passing day, and one day, she received an offer for a major role in a big movie. This was a huge step for Laura. When the movie was released, Laura's mother sat in front of the TV watching it together. They laughed and giggled because it was so proud to see their daughter as an actress. Laura received a huge paycheck. She was now in a position to rest for a while and care for her family. She said goodbye to her cafe job. This was a victory for her. Not only would she be able to support her family, but she could now build a life for herself. She was proud because she was finally living her dream. A year later, Laura was offered a major leading role. She had started to be recognized as the talented actress discovered by Noah Miller. In this movie, Laura delivered an incredible performance. She took both herself and her acting to the next level across the country. She began to be known as the talented actress discovered by Noah Miller. Everything began with her journey as an extra. The exhaustion and struggles from back then had only made her stronger. Now, she was a successful actress and a powerful woman, shaping her own life. As Laura sat one evening with her mother, flipping through an old photo album, her eyes filled with tears. Her brother's achievements, her own journey, all the struggles, they had all become memories in that moment. With the bittersweet memories of the past, she felt a deep sense of peace inside. The struggles, the sacrifices, the dreams, all had accumulated toward one goal: giving her family a better life. And now, with those dreams realized, there was a light shining in Laura's eyes. She felt that it had all been worth it. She could finally rest, having learned to survive as a strong woman. Her life had transformed into a story that gave hope to others. And this journey was just the beginning of everything. If you enjoyed the story, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. Make sure to turn on notifications so you don't miss any updates. I'm looking forward to your comments. Share your thoughts.